All right, welcome back, everybody. Real World Retirement, the podcast, the YouTube, the videos, the social media, all the fun. I'm excited. Today is going to be a lot of fun. Today's episode is called Peace and Purpose, the Journey. Now, this is going to be a fun one. Now, I am your host, Alex Pushman, and to give you a little bit of background, I'm a senior advisor here with Foguth Financial Group. I've been in the business well over a decade. And, you know, I always say I've done over 3,000 second opinions for families. And one of the things that we always talk about as advisors, in our firm at least, is experience matters. And good news on that, I have a phenomenal guest today, Sheila Maloney, who's going to be joining us. And so, number one, you know, when I talk about peace and purpose, the journey, I'm talking about a lot of different things. And if you're somebody out here who resonates with the story of Sheila, kind of gets into her case studies and the real world scenario she's dealt with her clients. If you're somebody who's kind of saying, you know what, that's me. This is pulling on my heartstring. This is something I'm worried about. Please engage with us. You know, it's our favorite thing to be able to have a great story where we just put something out here on a podcast or a YouTube channel, and we enjoy doing this. But our favorite stories is when people reach out, they ask us questions, they engage with us, and we're actually able to take that next step to help you out. So please engage with us, get involved with us. So Sheila, do me a favor. When you kind of look at this conversation of peace and purpose, the journey, number one, I'm going to kind of get into your story in here a second, but what would you break it down to the main points pertaining to peace and purpose, the journey? What does that mean to you? Like, what are the kind of the one or two main things that kind of come from that?
Well, Alex, first, thank you so much for having me here today. Like you said, a couple main breakdown points on that is first, I think being able to put your head on the pillow at the end of the day and knowing things are going to work out okay, and know that you've got that cushion, you've got the risk removed, you're able to look ahead and really see the journey in a peaceful way,
Right.
and know that you're going to accomplish the things that are important to you, to your family, to those that you love, and just make a difference in the world around you.
Okay. So how I take that, you know, just because we're obviously in the business, we do this, is number one, we're really talking about creating peace and purpose on a plan where you know how to have a distribution plan, an investment plan, a tax plan for your money while living. But then the second piece to that really gets into the legacy planning, estate planning, and handing that money down to your family. Right.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, hey, how do I make sure this lasts for me and work?
Exactly.
And then number two, how do I make sure I hand this down in the most proactive and effective way that I can? Is that fair?
Absolutely. We
Okay.
want to look at the lowest tax rate for the life of those funds, not just for a short 1 year period or just for a short time. We want to look at the entire longevity of those funds
Right.
and what they should accomplish.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, one thing that I always want to, you know, kind of dive into is because, you know, for you, your story of why you do this. Like that's my favorite thing is when I meet advisors, I'm like, why do you do what you do? You know, why do you love what you do? And you get so many different walks of life, but what's your story? Why have you picked financial planning and being a financial advisor as your, you know, your career?
I'm definitely somebody who thinks details matter. And so I got into the business about 14 years ago, not meeting directly with people, but in the back office, wanted to understand how things work, what happens. And I realized I could offer the most help to people and bring the most peace to people by meeting with them. So here I am 14 years later in the industry as a financial planner and just love every minute of it. There's nothing that makes my day better than meeting with a family and being able to show them that income plan, show them how to reduce those tax and create legacy that sometimes they didn't even know that they could do.
Right.
And so just being able to help them understand and break that down, it makes my day.
And it's funny because I, you know, little behind the curtain, you know, but when we got every time we do a podcast, we're always saying, hey, you know, what are the specific case studies? And we're always kind of going through a template with our team. And we got Sheila's. And I was like, man, Sheila could have been a teacher. This thing was detailed. It was beautiful formatting, everything. So the details is, you know, again, just from knowing you and working with you through obviously Foguth Financial, is you're a detail oriented person. And that is a very important element for any advisor, right?
Mm.
What would you say with your story has kind of, again, you know, separated you from other people? You know, is it, and again, I kind of know my answer, but I'm more curious about yours. For you, What is it that separated you from, most advisors you hear stories about that you feel kind of puts you in a different place?
I want each person to understand what is happening with their entire plan. So just I have a passion for helping people understand and creating that education so that they know exactly what's happening, what's going on, and that it's meeting their goals.
Right, right. Okay. And one thing I would always like to say, and again, as we talk to the public here, and we have all these listeners and these viewers and these subscribers. Number one, if this is your first time tuning in, please make sure you follow our page. Get engaged with us, whether it's YouTube, whether it's however you're finding this podcast, social media. Our social media platform has amazing content that our marketing team puts together. And our whole goal is education, which is why we're doing this. We just like doing it. So that's why we're here. So please engage with us. And again, I say this all the time. If you are listening to this today or a past or, from a past episode, you're like, man, I need some help on that. Please reach out to us. Our process is very transparent. We give answers and plans to people candidly that it doesn't cost anything, and we're still going to help you out. So if that's you, please engage with us. Reach out to us if you're listening to this. You say, hey, that sounds like me. Now, your story that you brought,
Yes.
I usually break it down in a couple different case studies, and you have a unique situation because it's kind of like one big story, but it kind of goes into two different elements of what we're talking about when we say peace and purpose, the journey. What do we mean by that? So if you don't mind kind of jumping into what you brought, this is an amazing one. It lands on my heart just from my family experience, but kind of walk us through the story and the case study that you had brought to the table today for the folks out here.
Absolutely. So I met with clients a number of years ago, and initially they were a little hesitant to share their journey. They weren't sure that they had saved enough. That is a big question everybody gets. How am I going to know if I can retire? It's a big deal to retire and to give up that paycheck
Right.
and assume that your assets are going to provide for that lifestyle that you want to maintain.
Right.
And so after several initial conversations, they had saved mainly pre-tax money. Often hearing that story of, oh, you'll be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. So majority of their savings were in that pre-tax bucket. They had a brokerage account, a small Roth IRA. And so as we went through their plan, it really became evident that number one, Roth conversions were something that we could talk about.
Got it.
Being able to talk about how can we take the known tax rate, what can we do today that could possibly reduce taxes down the road. And that was a huge benefit to them in how they could have more control and choice over their income. They weren't forced into required minimum distributions. And it gave them the opportunity to realize, hey, retirement is going to go well. We can cover this. And then it creates the next problem of how do we pass this along, right? Sometimes we think of it a problem, but it's a great opportunity.
Yes.
Not only can you benefit your communities and the people that you love, they were able to create education accounts for grandkids.
No kidding.
And so just being able to have that opportunity of something that they didn't know if they could retire to now here they are, multiple generations, creating legacy and knowing that what they're passing on is not going to cause a tax burden to their families.
Right.
And so being able to handle both of those things and walk through them with that journey is really an incredible process. And it contrasts greatly because of so many people that we work with that are like, well, I don't know if I want to remove risk from my account. And I think of other stories that didn't, I wasn't able to work with and didn't turn out in the same way.
So this family specifically, number one, what it sounds like, and again, feel free to dive into these, is number one, you took a proactive approach. You looked at it. You said, okay, listen, I think there's a lot of things we can do from investment choice to tax planning, right?
Yeah.
But your main piece was being proactive, making the adjustments. And then as you were going down that journey, and again, you and I both know this because we do this for a living, but it's like at some point the light goes off for people. And what I mean is you're worried about yourself, you're worried about your spending. And then all of a sudden, a good plan and a good advisor is going to lead you to a place where eventually you get to this path and you're like, I'm good. And now it becomes a shift of focus.
Yes.
So now you're talking about legacy planning. So basically it was creating a plan for them that worked, that considers their income, their investments, their taxes, right? And then that bridged you to a later conversation in the process that got to the estate and legacy planning.
Absolutely.
And still considering the tax plan. But now it's not for
Yes.
them, it's for them.
Yeah. Yes.
Interesting.
So it really helped create that lower lifetime tax bracket for their funds and how they wanted to use them, gave them control over being able to not have to be forced into required minimum distributions. She had been a teacher
Right.
and had a pension. A lot of income comes in and it increases those. We all know how that impacts Medicare. And then all of a sudden you hit that oftentimes early 80s. And people wonder, what am I going to do with all these funds coming in? And that proactive approach is going to give you the opportunity to maintain that control. You come to me when you're 90 and we can't do the same things we can do when you're 65.
Yeah. Now,
So it's a great.
yeah. And so, when we talk about peace and purpose, the journey, we're really talking about the journey of, hey, I'm about to retire, all the way to the journey of when they're passing away and handing that money down to their family.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so, the specific case that you had talked about, now, was it a married couple? Was it single?
Yeah.
What kind of give me a little bit of lay land on the
Yeah.
details?
So they were married. So, and you and I know from working in the industry, if you're married, there's a huge advantage to doing a lot of this tax planning while you're married.
Correct.
We call the widow's penalty when you go through the worst situation in your life
Right.
and you lose a spouse, and then all of a sudden you move from that married bracket to that single bracket.
Yes. Yes.
So taking advantage of that. And you mentioned something about retiring. It's an excellent point too, because if you're able to make some adjustments prior to retirement and how your contributions go, there's a lot of amazing options. So sometimes people say, I'm not yet retired, I don't need to meet with somebody. And I just encourage everybody to come in and let's take a look at your workplace plan and what tax saving opportunities do you have now
Right.
that will impact that down the road.
Absolutely.
As well.
And an interesting thing to talk about, because I know in a past episode, Joe and I had been talking, we were kind of talking about the 4 seasons, right?
Yes.
Of investing. It's very similar here, but really it's 2 seasons, and that's why, peace and purpose, the journey. I love that, because what it really is, it's broken down into 2 avenues. Hey, the first part of creating peace and purpose is you having a plan that is proactively looked at, where we're not just looking at, hey, where are we at today? Because, it's like a CPA, and I always use this example. I'm a broken record, right?
Yes.
It's like a CPA. What's the CPA's job? Well, the CPA's job is to look at the year and say, what can we do to get the taxes down for this year? We have the exact polar opposite view.
Yes.
We're looking at 30 years into the future, right? And so that proactive approach and perspective gives us the ability to say, hey, what can we do today or start doing today that's going to make a difference in 30 years for you, the family? And to your point now, I don't know how you feel about this. I know how I know my experience with it is. It's funny when you first meet people, right? Because everybody, when they're getting ready to retire, it's like they want to take care of home base, and they should. And you got to take care of home base before you can take care of anybody else.
Yes.
So that's that first part of peace and purpose for the journey.
Yes.
The second part of the peace and purpose journey is saying, now I'm going to hand the money down to my family as I pass away. And I'm no longer worried about the taxes. I'm no longer worried about who's getting what and how they're going to get it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the journey often is funny, because you'll first meet with a family like, well, do you have any legacy goals? They're like, they'll get what they get, and then it's, again, you kind of hit the nail on the head. For me, it's like, call it 75 to 80, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere usually in that window, it'll come up where the painting gets very clear of like, okay, I'm not going to get through this. So then that's where I always joke around. I say it gets fun.
Yes.
Maybe you're doing something for the grandkids, right?
Right.
And you're creating those educational accounts.
And there's so many options. I mean, whether you're talking about certain types of trust or ILETs or life insurance or second to die, I mean, the opportunities are endless.
Yes.
So there's always something that will fit each person and meet their specific goals. Because that's the unique thing about financial planning is each story, each plan is so different, right? Because they have different goals,
right? And if you're somebody out there where you're in a point in your life where you're saying, "Hey, number one, I don't feel comfortable with my plan," I want to encourage you to reach out to us and engage with us. We have phenomenal, experts just like Sheila and myself here who are going to help you and educate you. Or you're worried about handing the money down, right? So the story basically for you is we have this peace and purpose, the journey, if you will. Can you give me some details of the specific family that you were kind of, you're helping out in this story. Kind of walk me down that path with what you exactly
Absolutely.
did for him.
So he was an engineer, much like myself, very detail oriented,
The
wanted to know.
spreadsheets, right?
Yes. Yes. So, and she was a teacher, so wanted to have that understanding, wanted to understand what was going to happen. They had 2 kids and 3 grandkids.
Okay.
And so initially, just what you said, hey, if the kids get something, they get what they get. I'm not worried about it.
Right.
And reframing that in the mindset of, I completely agree, right? I secretly kind of hope that each of my clients spend every last dollar that they earned, right? They
Right.
earned it, they should
Absolutely.
spend it.
Yeah.
But if they've been great savers, you and I know that is oftentimes they don't spend at the same level that they saved.
It doesn't just change.
Exactly.
They're not going to buy a Maserati the day, they retire, right?
Absolutely. So once they realized that this planning was about sending more money to those that they love, either they spend it or they give it to those that they love and keep it. Not that we don't pay our taxes, but we don't need to pay extra.
Right. Just from not knowing the rules.
Exactly.
Right.
You got it. So making sure that they understood how we looked at that, and that created that opportunity of that light bulb moment that you talked about, that, oh, there is a way we can look at these Roth conversions and specifically apply it to them, right? It might mean sometimes people will say, well, I want an exact plan for the next 10 years. You've got to go year by year,
it's impossible.
Right? Yeah. Inevitably, your spouse might decide they want to become a camping person, and now you've got a new camper in the yard, right? So maybe there's less Roth conversion, but I tell people, whether you take that money out and spend it, whether you convert it, whether you gift it, you're removing it from that future required minimum distribution. Yeah. So you're investing in yourself, you're investing in your choices, however that money is spent. So it's looking at that.
And you mentioned 2 things, and I'm going to dive into them just because I want to make sure, unless you are a financial advisor or very, very educated on these subjects, they would have just, you've been like, I don't know what that means. Second to die policy and an ILET. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the second to die policy, and did you end up doing one of those for the families, good, bad, and different, but what, can you just explain really quick what a second to die life insurance policy and an ILET are just to the listeners?
So for these clients, we went with an ILET, which means that they worked with an attorney and created a trust. So an ILET is a life insurance policy that is owned by the trust. And it's not for everyone. So we have to evaluate your specific situation with an attorney and see what makes the most sense.
Right.
But it gives a great opportunity where the assets are not in your name, right? They're in the name of this trust. And so they allow you to it's not part of your estate.
Got it.
And it was a great way for them to know that these assets were going to go to their grandkids in a way and provide for that education. There's a couple of other accounts that oftentimes are used, and I'll throw some more lingo out there, right? UTMA or UGMA accounts.
Yeah.
These are uniform transfer or uniform gifting accounts for minors. And I always tell people, you do something like that, you use a UTMA or UGMA account, you've kind of opened the door, right? The kid hits 18 and they want a Maserati. You've got no chance of them going to school, right? They're having a good time. They're out the door.
Right.
So having some of these things and knowing who you're planning for really gives you that peace of mind of knowing. So for my specific clients, the ILET worked well for their situation. A number of other times we've used a second to die. Okay. That's a great option if you're married and you want to provide for your kids. Maybe there's assets that you want to utilize, right? You don't want them removed from your control like the ILET does.
Right.
But you want to be able to maintain that control, but you don't want to leave that tax burden to your kids. And so it was kind of a tough decision between those two for them because both could have worked well. But that allows a tax-free benefit that allows the kids after both spouses have passed, right? Like you mentioned earlier, we think of flying in an airplane, right? You can't help the person next to you if there's plane problems until you put your oxygen mask on. And so that's the same thing with that second to die is everything remains for spouses until.
Okay, because I'm sure people are like, wait, what did she just say? A second to die in an ILET? And just for the record, the ILET, like she said, irrevocable life insurance trust.
Yep.
And then you have a second to die life insurance policy. Again, both can be phenomenal tax planning initiatives for legacy planning and kind of getting back that now. That's a phenomenal kind of story where, hey, that family was worried and concerned about the legacy plan. Is there another story that you're thinking of that would be relevant to this conversation, or anything else of a case study that you think would be relevant to this one?
I think so oftentimes people get worried about, oh, I don't know if I can talk to somebody, or I don't know, if it's worth the time. And I encourage everybody to just come have the conversation. It's so important. So many times I think of two specific people
Okay.
that have come in and I didn't end up working with them,
Okay.
and found out later on, they hadn't made really great choices, right? So inevitably, you wish you could do anything to help that person out and remove some of the risk from the portfolio, do some tax planning so that they're not 80 and out of money, and things didn't work out well for them.
Yeah.
So I think just having that proactive, so many things we leave to professionals, and then it comes to finances, and we decide that Google is going to have the better answer for us when we think about economists. I mean,
Right.
you and I know
Right.
how many
Right.
CE
Good old
credits.
Dr. Google.
Exactly. Exactly. So we know how many CE credits and the
Right.
trainings and the resources that we have, the economists, all of the education that goes into what we do and what we plan. And knowing things that can be adjusted and moved makes such a difference. And you think of people that are in those same situations, and one ends up, their kids are millionaires, and
Right.
the next one, they're barely getting by. It's a
Yeah.
drastic
Yeah.
contrast that really makes you appreciate.
And I love that. And because, the story I always think about when we talk about, so like, I love that, because that kind of second story, hey, I had two different clients. They were a little bit insecure to talk to me. Right.
Yeah.
And I've seen it too. It's like, Alex, oh, I'm not worth your time. And there's always that water under the bridge story. I should have done this different. I could have done that. And no, I took my money out of the market in '08, and then it never came back, and I've been sitting on the sidelines. We've heard it all.
Yep.
And our job is not to judge people. Our job is not to, matter of fact, us as a firm, we do not have minimum requirements to work with clients, and we do that by design. And that leads back to, Mike, our owner, and even my family. My grandfather, right, is why I kind of got into this business. My grandfather ran out of money, had to move with my parents. And when he needed the most help is when he had the least amount of money.
Yeah.
And so me personally, my moral compass is like, I'll talk to anybody at any dollar figure, because that's not what it's about. So if that's you, if you've always put off, hey, I don't want to talk to somebody because I don't have enough money, or that's only for the wealthy people, right? And we've always talked about
it. It's for everybody.
It's for everybody. And there's not a single person on earth that we're not going to answer your questions and give you the answers and help you make an educated choice. Because
Absolutely.
To your point, there's always opportunities to make improvements.
Yep.
And that's what I figured out is I've never sat down with a family and been like, it's perfect. Everything's great. Like, there's always an opportunity. And a lot of it just leans into that education of knowing what your options, right?
Well, laws change, investment options change, opportunities. There's so many things you think of. I mean, decades ago, ETFs weren't even an option. Exchange traded funds.
Mutual fund or a stock or a bond. Like,
yeah. So there's always, who's to, maybe in 10 more years, Bitcoin will be like the normal thing that people do. You just don't know what's going to change. So having that constant, you can't just do one thing and then think that you're done for the rest of your retirement or retirement planning. It's a constant conversation.
Amen. That's very well put. Any other, because again, the kind of the two stories I'm hearing is, we have this first story with this family, and one of their main issues was, hey, I don't have a legacy and estate plan. And this other kind of situation is folks, when they say, hey, listen, I don't feel comfortable to talk to a professional because I don't have enough money. Any other kind of nuggets or, elements of either of those stories that you feel would be relevant for the listeners to hear that might connect with them on their own situation?
Oftentimes I get the question, should I have a trust? And that is definitely a personal choice, but I always direct clients, because it's done through an attorney, right? If you're going to have a trust, it's through an attorney. I always tell people, think about who, what, and when. Who do you want to give to what do you want to give and when do you want them to get that?
Right.
Is it something that you immediately want them to receive this, or is it something that needs to be broken out throughout the years? And that's a very personal decision.
Right.
And oftentimes thinking through that, they answer their own question. So that would be if you're concerned with the legacy planning, think about that who, what, and when.
I love that who, what, when, because, peace and purpose, the journey. We're talking about, the whole concept of you worked your whole life.
Yes.
You saved all this money. And what people don't understand, when I say you've saved all this money, that's a completely relative statement.
Yes.
I have clients who have, $20,000 and they're starting a savings plan today. I'm encouraging them to start a savings plan. I have other clients who have $18, $20 million, right?
Right.
And that journey and how you can create peace and purpose for people is a really basic factor of educating them, helping them understand. And you put it, the who, the what, the why, right?
Yeah.
And I love that because simplification is our job.
Yes.
In basically a short shot, our job is to simplify these really complicated, overwhelming, scary subjects.
Yes.
Right. I know you and Katie work close together. We're always joking around, like, we got to have uncomfortable conversations all the time,
Yes.
But it's healthy. And
Right.
The more you talk about that, the more peace and just clarity.
The more honest answer.
Yes. Okay. So summary of the story here is we have this family that didn't really have any plan.
No.
And they didn't really know what their options were. And your whole process was laying out, hey, let me get the whole story. Let me understand where you're at. Let's make sure we take care of you. And then we move on to the second half, which is taking care of the family and how we can be proactive about handing the money down in a tax efficient manner.
Yep.
It goes to the right people when they wanted it and how they wanted it. Right.
Yes.
And then also I love that encouragement of maybe there's folks out there and families out there who don't have $1 million and have neglected their education because they don't maybe feel like they're worth it. And that's just not the case.
Right. Absolutely. So it is definitely for everybody, and just keeping that in mind. I love to handle things one thing at a time.
Amen.
I think it just makes it easier to understand, and the client gets more comfortable with that, right? Even if it's somebody I don't end up working with, they understand how that kind of breaks down. And so being able to address their most important issue first.
Right.
Going from there.
Right. Anything else you'd like to add to today's episode, Sheila? Because this is, again, these are real world conversations that you're having that I think is gonna land with a lot of folks out there. Anything else you'd want to add to today's conversation?
This has been a lot of fun. It's been fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And then Sheila, you got you're one of the best hearts in the business.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for coming today. And again, for all you listeners out there, if there's stuff we're talking about that lands with you that you say, you know what, that's me. Timing is everything. There are no mistakes. If you're listening to a certain message like this and you feel you need further education or some help, Sheila is a phenomenal professional who can help answer those questions. We have a great team behind us. Engage with us. Follow us on social media. Get on YouTube, right? Jump on the old Instagram if you got it. Whatever it takes for you to connect, please do so. Send us a message. Send us an email. Call our office. We're available, and we love doing this. We do this just because we enjoy it. But please engage with us. I want to thank you to all the listeners out there. I hope you're getting some good nuggets out of here. Our goal when we put these together is if you listening can pick up one or two things that you hadn't heard or thought of before, that we're doing our job. So thank you for listening. I want to encourage you to tune in next time. Keep coming back. Make sure you subscribe and tune in for the next episode. And again, Peace and Purpose, The Journey with Sheila Maloney. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, I'm the host, Alex Pushman. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one.
Advisory services provided by Foguth Wealth Management LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. For additional information, visit advisorinfo.sec.gov and search 327-434.